had a back and forth over the course of a week. The counter proposals that the studios gave were insufficient, and then they immediately kind of leaked it to the press despite a media blackout. And of course, this just pissed everyone off, and now no one's calling anyone again.
Alex Press is a staff writer for Jacobin magazine. Very good stuff going on there, and she is our next guest on the Valid Labor Report. Alex, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Can't believe this is my first time on here, I think.
I know, yeah, we've been we talk occasionally, and I saw you last year, almost, it would have been actually 18 months ago at the last Labor Notes conference, and we were like, oh yeah, we got to have you on. And then, I don't know, 18 months later, here we are.
That's right. Happy to be here.
Well, really glad to have you. Appreciate it, and appreciate everything that you've been doing, covering the UAW stuff. And so we're going to talk about that. But first, I have a clip that I'm really excited to show you, because I think it's going to make you really happy. I think you're going to be excited to see this. And it's about the SAG-AFTRA strike. And you've been doing a lot of reporting about what's been going on with SAG and WGA with their strike against the Hollywood media companies. And so let's, I won't preface it too much more than that. It's a little bit longer of a clip. It's about 2 minutes long. But we'll just go ahead and play this, and then I want to know what you think about it. Let's play this clip from Bill Maher, Ben.
The strike is a perfect example. Those guys would never go back. This strike could go on till the 24th century. They would stay out. I feel for my writers. I love my writers. I'm one of my writers. But there's a big other side to it, and a lot of people are being hurt besides them. A lot of people who don't make as much money as them in this bipartisan world we have, where you're just in one camp or the other. There's no in between. You're either for the strike, like they're fucking Che Guevara out there, like this is Cesar Chavez lettuce picking strike, or you're with Trump. Like there's no different. There's only two camps, and it's much more complicated than that.
It is, but I do feel like there is a lot of the points, a lot of the grievances I kind of agree with.
I do understand that they're getting screwed a bit by the streamers, yes.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a change, and you either, it's like anything that is, I believe in free market, but I also believe in trust and then verify, right?
What does that mean?
Meaning, you don't trust, like the reason, Zaslav made $400 million, and I think they're looking for 80 million for, it's like they're gonna, you leave a kid in front of a bowl of marshmallows, they're gonna eat the marshmallows. It's not like some grand thing.
Well, I don't know. What you're saying, they're only asking for $80 million?
Well, I'm saying
they're asking for a lot of things.
They're asking for a lot of things.
Like kooky. Like what I find objectionable about the philosophy of the strike, it seems to be they have really morphed a long way from 2007 strike, where they kind of believe that you're owed a living as a writer, and you're not. This is show business. This is a make or miss league, and not everybody.
You don't think that that streamers should reveal numbers so that they can?
Oh, maybe
things?
Sure.
So Alex, you just gotta be fair to Bill. It is pretty crazy thinking that you deserve to make a living, right?
I love at the end that the guy mentions one of the concrete demands about streamers sharing their numbers, and Bill is like, oh, that is a good idea. He just has no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, that absolutely came through, because you could tell, I could almost feel the kind of stop in his voice after he said some of their demands are kooky, because after you say that, you obviously have to at least say one demand that's kooky, and then he was like, "Oh shit! Now I've got to say something like I half know what I'm talking about." And the thing that came out was, "Oh, they want to be able to live."
That's kooky. That's the least kooky demand. I mean, you could at least mention AI or something if you want to get like weird, but a living is bread and butter.
Yeah, it was so, how would you feel right now if you were a writer for Bill Maher?
Oh.
I gotta say, an old friend of mine who's was a TV writer, I don't think he works in the industry anymore, he tweeted in response to this clip, I think, that his agent had tried to get him to be a writer on Bill Maher and said, the writers there get paid the best of anyone in late night. And he said, why is that? And the agent was like, well, because it's so awful to work with Bill.
Yeah, well, that I do not doubt it from all of his nonsense that he puts out on his show. And so, that's kind of a little bit of levity there because it's just so silly. But where are we with the SAG and the WGA strikes right now?
There's not a lot of movement. I mean, the last thing was, so the studios haven't talked to SAG-AFTRA at all. They finally, called the WGA back. They had a back and forth over the course of a week in late August, and it once again kind of devolved where, the counter proposals that the studios gave were insufficient for the union, and then they immediately kind of leaked it to the press despite a media blackout, and kind of they're trying to sow division among the writers. And of course, this just pissed everyone off, and now, no one's calling anyone again. So there is really no end in sight right now for the strike, which is crazy because it is month 4, going into 5 for the writers, and day 60 or something for SAG-AFTRA. So not a short strike and nowhere near resolved.
That is wild because, despite Bill Maher thinking that, these demands are kooky, they're really not. I mean, go through some of the, can you tell us some of the things that, the writers and the actors are looking for?
Yeah. So, I mean, the really kind of interesting one was what was mentioned at the end of that clip when the guy he's talking to says, the streamers should share their numbers. So this is about the fact that if you make a show for Netflix, even if you created the show, you have no idea how many people watch it.
Right.
The streamers keep that data private. It's really interesting because back in in broadcast or network television, you immediately had the numbers, right? A Nielsen rating score would be up by the next morning. And this isn't just about, knowing that you're successful or not. But there are residual payments tied to the success of a show. And so this is it's a demand that the SAG-AFTRA and WGA members share, is that they want a new residual based on the success of their shows on streaming. But first, they would have to have the data to know how successful they are. So it's just, I mentioned that one because it's really interesting that all of these writers and actors are living in this world where they have no idea how many people are watching their work. And when they try to hear it from the studio execs, they're just totally, it's like speaking to a wall, right? They just have no information. So that's one. There's basic things like they want a significant raise. Writer pay has gone down something, some significant percentage, I think 23% if adjusted for inflation for the past decade. Much more of the membership in the WGA is now making the minimum, even if they have decades of experience. So there's obvious things like that. SAG-AFTRA, has health insurance and pension fund holes to fill. And then AI, of course, people want regulations and control over the use of AI. I think this is, the WGA also has this demand, but SAG-AFTRA is kind of like this canary in the coal mine around AI because performers already are having their likenesses scanned. And it's kind of an interesting thing to think about just how big of a threat it poses. Say half of the background actors now are just, you're not hiring them, you're just using their likenesses and digitally generating them. Well, you also don't need costume and hair. You don't, it starts affecting IATSE, it starts affecting all kinds of people. So that's a big one.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Yeah, absolutely. And scanning people's likenesses and being able to use that for background actors in perpetuity really does kind of cut at the heart of the ability to, break into the industry. Make it or break it industry, is what Bill Maher said. And this is really cutting into people's ability to make it, because that's how folks do get their big shot. I have a friend that one of my closest friends here. She's an actor, and she, we were talking about the SAG strike, and she was speaking to me about how her and her local production company, they really support it, and they think that it's really important, because they recognize how important these issues are, even for kind of the indie actors. And she went on, she told me a long story about Guthrie from Friends. I don't know if you've watched Friends or if you remember Guthrie.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so Guthrie was the platinum blonde bartender at the coffee shop, and he was not supposed to be a recurring character. He was just one scene in one show, and she was like, and there was something about him that the directors liked and the producers liked, and so he became like a really recurring character, to where towards the end of the show he was getting long speaking lines and some plot points centering around him, and she was like, if you take away our ability to do that, the only people who are going to be able to be actors are like Jennifer Aniston's children, right? And so that seemed to me to be like a really powerful anecdote to go along with kind of the data of these arguments that the actors are making.
Yeah, definitely. And and it's a different sort of take on it. But when I was out in LA, I was speaking to this actor on the picket lines outside of the Netflix corporate offices, which is like heart of Hollywood. And I was speaking to this woman, Stevie Nelson, who had hosted a show on Nickelodeon for a few seasons. And so we're not even talking about background actor here. She was the host of the show. And she immediately started telling me, I'm afraid that there's enough footage of me hosting a television show that you could train AI on that, and you could have me hosting shows, forever in, digitally saying things I never said, doing things I never did. She was like, this would be it's a different tack. It's more about, sort of control over oneself. It's quite literally control over one's body, because, say the show has her doing or saying horrible things. It would be impossible to tell that she didn't really say those things, right? And so people really, I think, feel like this is their autonomy itself is kind of at risk here, in the age of like endless kind of digital fakes and things like that. That's a real fear too. These are people's voices. It's their livelihood, it's their bodies and their voices for performers. So, it sort of is cutting at a very deep level, I think, for a lot of these workers.
And there is some concern among the, among some people in the union about retaliation for being too publicly in support of the strike. If you're not like a huge, big A-list celebrity. I was listening to one interview where they said that there were some not too veiled threats about, people on the bargaining committee for SAG never being able to work in the industry again. And, that's another one of the things that the studios are doing to try to break the strike. And that makes me have all the more respect for people, especially like Adam Conover, who's been so publicly, the face of the strike, really, in a lot of ways, for both the writers and now the actors. He's well known. He's like a household name, but he's not somebody that, the studios could never live without, right? And so that takes, it seems to me, like a lot of courage.
Yeah, just yesterday, we haven't published it yet, but I had a long conversation with this writer, Alex O'Keefe, who wrote for The Bear. And that was the first show he ever wrote for. He's a younger guy. He's, only been in the WGA a few years. And he likewise has become this really outspoken figure. I think he sort of got well known at the very beginning of the strike because he went on CNN and said that he had, been paid something like, below even almost like $40,000 for that show. I've spoken to him about how he when he was writing that show, he was living in New York City still before he moved to LA. And it was during the pandemic. He would be writing at his apartment. He had a space heater because the heat was broken. And sometimes when he would plug the space heater in, the power would go out in his apartment. So he ended up having to write a lot of an episode at the library, and so this is a working class issue, right. And he then goes on and wins awards for the show, huge buzzy hit. He ends up attending the award show with a bow tie that he bought on credit. He borrowed money from his brother to get a suit. And, this guy too, I'd say even more than Adam, because he's newer to the industry. And so, he was his career was on a real upswing. He lucked into a huge hit, right? He was saying, blacklisting is very much real. It's not just the anti-communist, the hearings that we all know about in Hollywood. It is a thing of, the town runs on reputation, and blacklisting, I guess we call it gray listing, this sort of soft avoidance of hiring people who are seen as labor militants or difficult to work with. If you're the boss, that's how you would describe it. Is a constant in Hollywood. And it's not just Hollywood, of course. This is like every industry. There's some level of this. But these people, I think, Alex was saying to me, it was obvious that if people like him didn't do this, didn't take their success that they'd lucked into and use it to say, hey, actually, we need a culture of solidarity here and we need massive change. And I know Adam feels the same way. They're who would do it, right? We have to risk something. And it has been inspiring, right? Because these are people, there will be repercussions. There were after the last writer's strike. There always are when there's a failed union organizing campaign in Hollywood. Often the people who led it then are never hired again. So there are real stakes here for people's lives.
Absolutely. Maximilian Alvarez is in the chat, and he said he gave us a quote from one of the SAG-AFTRA members that he interviewed this week. Bethany Ann Lind said, "We are an industry that tells the stories of the human experience. We reflect humanity back to itself, and the studios literally would take the human beings out of all of it if they could, because that would be cheaper." And I really do think that's kind of buttons up the issue right there.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project. And you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.